6 rides, 6 failures, 6 investigations, all of which revealed that these incidents could have been avoided. These are 6 disturbing situations in which amusement park rides literally broke apart on camera. The Tsunami inverted roller coaster at M&D's theme park in Motherwell has been operating since the early 2000s. It was built by Pinfari, a small steel coaster designed for tight turns, low upside-down sections close to the track, and short ride cycles meant for families and everyday park visitors. Now on paper, it looked like a normal mid-level thrill ride. But in reality, it really depended on the wheels being properly aligned and regular checks under the train to make sure everything stayed locked onto the track through every dangerous curve and drop. On June 26, 2016, the train carrying multiple passengers was going through a sharp curve where the sideways force on the ride was at its strongest. A key part of the wheel assembly failed, which caused the front of the train to lift and derail off the track. Once the first car came off the rail, the rest of the train followed almost immediately because the cars were tightly linked together. The train then fell about 20 feet into a lower children's ride area, turning a normal ride cycle into a seriously dangerous crash on multiple levels. One of the riders, 13-year-old Elide McGuinness, described the moment afterward as feeling like the train just stopped being on anything solid. Emergency responders reached the scene within minutes and started treating a range of injuries, including spinal injuries, broken bones, and blunt force trauma suffered by both children and adults. Witness Graham Smith, who was standing near the fence around the ride, said, "There was no gradual slowdown. It just came off and felt like it had no support left at all." The investigation by the Scottish Health and Safety Executive found a mix of issues, including worn wheel parts, uneven inspection timing, and delays in replacing parts that were already starting to wear down. Internal records also showed early warning signs in maintenance logs, like unusual shaking and small alignment changes that were written down but not fixed in time. After the investigation, the ride was taken apart for good, and the park later reduced the number of large mechanical rides it operated. The Flying Saucer Pendulum Ride was a large spinning disc ride that carried a full circle of passengers while swinging in wide arcs. The ride depended on one main support arm to handle most of the force during every swing and rotation. In June 2019, during a high swing, that support arm snapped at a weak point near the joint instead of bending the way it was supposed to. The passenger disc immediately detached, and the entire gondola crashed to the ground within seconds. Among the riders was 18-year-old Dilshad Karimov, who survived with multiple fractures and internal injuries that required surgery. Emergency responders described a chaotic scene with several passengers trapped in bent seats. Witness Aziza Rakimova, who filmed the incident nearby, said, "There was no warning, no slowing down. 1 second it was swinging, and the next second it was just gone." Post-incident checks later suggested the metal had been wearing down for a long time and that the main shaft had not been properly tested. Authorities later shut down similar pendulum rides until further inspections could be completed. Now, the Discovery ride at Askari Amusement Park in Karachi was a large rotating pendulum ride that lifted passengers to about 50 to 60 feet while spinning them at a steady speed. The main axle was the only part holding the whole ride together, carrying all the force between the motor and the passenger gondola. On July 15, 2018, during what was described as a normal operating cycle, the axle suddenly failed. It snapped at a point that had become weak over time, and once it broke, the entire gondola came loose and dropped almost immediately. 16-year-old Hamza Ali, who was sitting near the outer edge of the gondola, survived, but had to undergo emergency surgery for multiple fractures and a head injury. Another passenger, Sana Ahmed, 22, later told reporters, "It felt like we suddenly went weightless in the wrong way, like the ride just vanished underneath us." Emergency teams rushed several injured passengers to Civil Hospital Karachi, where a number of them were still in critical condition. Investigators later found that the section beneath the shaft had not been properly checked, and no signs that deeper testing had been done on the axle, even though it was old and heavily used. The ride had passed normal visual inspections before running, but no one had ever performed a more detailed check. After the incident, the Discovery ride was shut down for good, and it led to wider safety reviews across both traveling and permanent amusement rides in the area. Jetline was a steel roller coaster operating at Gröna Lund since 1988 and was one of Sweden's most well-known rides. It reached speeds of around 56 miles per hour and relied on control arms to keep the train stable through constant stress and repeated runs. On June 25, 2023, one of those control arms snapped while the train was on a high section of track. The coaster became unstable, partially came off the rails, and suddenly stopped mid-track, leaving passengers exposed high above the ground. One of the victims, 35-year-old teacher Karin Elmgard, was thrown from the ride and fell about 20 feet. She later died from her injuries. Her husband, Mikael Elmgard, survived by grabbing onto a structural beam during the derailment. He later told the court, "It all happened so fast that my mind didn't even register she was gone until I was already holding on." Investigators later found that some replacement parts used during early maintenance didn't match the original specifications. Some reinforcement pieces were missing, and parts of the welding had not been done properly, which likely weakened the structure over time. The ride was permanently shut down and taken apart afterward. The traveling fair in Mojali had been given permission to stay open longer than originally planned, allowing the rides to run into early September. One of the main attractions was a 50-foot drop tower that was supposed to bring riders down in a controlled freefall using a mix of mechanical and electromagnetic braking systems. On September 4, 2022, during a night ride, the braking system didn't engage as the platform came down. The carriage filled with passengers, including children, dropped without slowing down and hit the base platform at full speed. Arjun Singh, 19, later said, "There was no moment to get ready, it just went straight down." At least 16 people were taken to a hospital with different injuries. Witness Neha Verma said, "We thought it was still part of the ride until it hit the ground and people started screaming everywhere." Investigators later found that inspection records for the extended operating period were missing or incomplete, and there was no clear proof the braking system had been properly tested after the extension was approved. The ride was shut down immediately, and authorities began reviewing other traveling fairs operating under similar permits. The Fireball ride, built by KMG in 1998, was a pendulum ride that carried 24 passengers and moved very fast, swinging them in a wide arc while also spinning them in a gondola at the top of each swing. And by 2017, it had been running for nearly 20 years, going through constant stress, vibration, and exposure to weather over time. On July 26, 2017, during opening night at the Ohio State Fair, the support arm holding the gondola suffered a sudden internal failure caused by corrosion that had built up inside the hollow metal beam. The rust damage couldn't be seen from the outside and had slowly developed over the years without being detected, mainly because there were no requirements to inspect inside the structure. 18-year-old Tyler Jarrell, who had signed up for the U.S. Marine Corps just days earlier, was thrown from the ride and died from blunt force injuries. His girlfriend, 19-year-old Keziah Lewis, suffered several serious fractures and later said she kept waking up in the hospital asking where Tyler was, before being told that he didn't survive. Witness Julian Bellinger, who recorded the incident on his phone, said, "It looked like the ride just ripped itself apart in midair." Investigators later found that the inside walls of the support beam had become dangerously thin over the years, leaving the structure too weak to handle the force of the ride anymore. And after the accident, the Fireball was removed permanently, and several US states later placed restrictions or outright bans on similar models.